If you've been following along with my tutorials on Oxygen right now, you'll notice that we've gotten to the point where we've designed a website, but we haven't really managed the content inside. And so we're going to look at how to create more client-friendly websites using Gutenberg in this tutorial. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that the Oxygen Gutenberg integration is turned on. And then I also have some other plugins that I like for Gutenberg, including the editor's kit. Now, in order to take a look at how this kind of works, let's go to a page such as my sample page. Now, this sample page has a bunch of different content already. Let me remove that block because I was playing around. But this is just some basic Gutenberg content right now. Now you'll notice I might have been editing this page, so here's another little helpful tip, and that is if you ever have edited a page with Gutenberg, all you have to do to remove that, with Oxygen, all you have to do to remove that is delete your shortcodes and update that page, and those are gone. Now what is nice is that you can always go back to revisions of that page if you needed to get those shortcodes back. Anyway, I want to have a page which has absolutely no Oxygen use at all, and it just has my Gutenberg right there in the center. And that's exactly what I want. And it's very easy for a client to get into the back end and use the Gutenberg editor for the content of that page, just like they would use for the contents of a post. Now, one thing to note is that you'll notice right now that there's a little bit of styling that's applied, and if I look at this in the front end, you will not see that exact same styling. And that's once again one of the issues with Oxygen, where it takes over the theme so much that it's a little bit more difficult for you to use the built-in styles that are already there. So you really have to style these with CSS after the fact. So anyway, one of the things that you could do here is if you inspect this and you find that that is a block quote, so you might be able to find the styles for that and actually grab them. So here is that block quote, and there you can see the block quote styles, and I would grab those and then take that CSS and apply it on the front end. Anyway, in order to edit this page with Oxygen as well, I'm going to go ahead and go into Oxygen. And let's look at maybe the first way you might do this. And by the way, these tutorials once again are not about design, they are purely about functionality. So please excuse if everything looks really ugly. So in order to use that Gutenberg content, as this is an Oxygen enabled page, what we need to do is first create, I like a little wrapper, and I'm not using a container or a section in this case because the section is already part of the template, which is using the inner content for this content of this page. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start off with just a simple title, and I'm going to use the dynamic data shortcode for the title. So you'll see that this will generate the page title for the sample page. And now I'm going to add some text, and likewise with this, I'm going to bring in some dynamic data and use the page content. If I click off of that, you'll see we are putting in that content of the page. Really easy to do. And now if I look at this in the front end, you'll see there we have our page title, and then we have all of the content. Now just be aware, one of the things that we did in a previous tutorial is we added in so that if there is a featured image for this page, it will create a banner image that's used on that page as well. So let's hit leave, and that is showing. And the reason that's showing is that that is part of the template for the page itself. And you'll see, of course, we have that same page name appearing here as there. Now I'm going to edit this page a little bit differently. Let me go ahead and get rid of that featured image for now. And what I want to do is edit all of the content in oxygen because I want to add more to this page. So I'm going to come back to my other page, which is still in oxygen, and I'm going to start to add another element. I'm going to add a div, and this div is going to have a background color that's darker, and I'm going to make sure that I add some text inside. Now notice when I add that text, we can't see the text at first because it's kind of dark by default. And that text I want to make a little bit bigger. So I use percentages or EMs typically. I'm going to make it about 200% bigger. And then let's just say this is a message. Now, with that div selected, I'm going to go ahead and center it. And I usually center it this way as well, just to make sure. And then I also want to add some padding to this. So I'm going to add some 30 pix padding around it everywhere. So that creates a more usable design element as some sort of like call out message. I'm going to go ahead and save this currently. And let's go back and look at our page in the edit version. If we look at our page in the edit version, you'll notice that I don't see that gray message. And the reason why is because it's being handled by Oxygen, not by Gutenberg. But if I go ahead and refresh my page, oops, let me edit that page. I want to make sure that I get rid of that featured image and view that page. Okay, you'll see that that message is there. Now it's being contained because once again this is using the page template, and that has a section that is containing all that, so it's not going full width, and that's something that, if you had to have that functionality, you'd have to find a different way to do things. Anyway, now that I have this message in here, the problem is that when you're in the front end, or in the back end rather, you can't see that message to be able to edit it. So the client doesn't really know it's there. Now there are two different strategies for allowing them to edit the Oxygen content in Gutenberg. One way is to make the entire page editable in Gutenberg. Now when you have a fairly complicated page, that works kind of well. I'm going to go ahead and let this refresh. Here's what you see now. You see that the dynamic data which you had before is now gone. You can't really access that content that you had before, but now you get to access that new Gutenberg or Oxygen element that you have placed in the page, which is great. And so you could say, here's a new message. You could update it. You could even add, by the way, you can add some new content. This is new Gutenberg content. And you can add that below. And if I view that page afterwards, you'll see that it accepts the changes that I've made to that Oxygen-based element. And I can add in new Gutenberg content, but it always goes below. And the problem with this is that that can be a real issue if you're trying to be able to move things around. So I actually don't really suggest making the full page editable unless all of the content is within Oxygen. So I'm going to take that off and refresh the page. And now you'll see I get back to that original content. The problem is, once again, if I go back to my editor, this div is being injected into the page, and I want to be able to put it in the page when I want it. So I'm going to open up my structure panel, and I'm going to take that div and I'm going to copy it to a new Gutenberg block. So I'm going to call this my Ox block, and this is going to be message. So I've just saved that. Now what we want to do is delete this so it's no longer a part of the page content itself, or let's say the Oxygen content for that page. And so instead I'll go ahead and view that page again just to make sure it is gone. So we still have our title and just the regular Gutenberg content. And now what I have the ability to do is to add that element in anywhere I want, because it's now accessible in the Oxygen blocks settings. Now I can say this is another message. I get to change that and then go ahead and view this, and you'll see it's now injected into the page. Once again, because of the fact that this particular page is using a container, that's why you're seeing this being contained by the page, even though in the back end it is going full width. So that is something just to be mindful about when it comes to Oxygen and Gutenberg integration. It can be kind of a pain when you're trying to make things full screen. And if you have or full width, if you have a tutorial that you know about that helps do this, please go ahead and post a reply about it. Now, a couple other things that I want to take a look at real quick are how to improve the Gutenberg experience. Well, before I do that though, let me just show you one other thing about this Gutenberg thing. This Oxygen element can be edited here, or it can be edited from the block library in Oxygen, which is great. You just click on that, it opens up the Oxygen builder for this element. Takes it a second to load. But what's great about this is that if I decided that I wanted to change to a different background color, or maybe I wanted to even add in a background image to this. So I'm going to browse for a background image, and I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to make it 50% and 50%, and it's going to be on cover. Now, if I go back to that page and I refresh, you'll see that is in there, which is great. Now notice that I don't have the ability to edit this particular image, because certain things like background elements and other CSS things that you do, you don't actually have the ability to change. So just be aware of that kind of issue. But of course you could make that the featured image of the page if you wanted to have that be editable. Another thing to be aware of though is that you can add images in here. So I'm going to add in an image, and so that's just a little placeholder. And let me see if I go to the media library, choose an image, and choose the thumbnail. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and come back and refresh this page. So you'll see that that image is here, and it would be really nice if you could double click on it and edit that image. Well, unfortunately it doesn't seem to work well when you use an image ID, but if you use an image URL, it does work. Now this can be kind of a problem. One of the reasons why is if I want to use this 150 by 150 and I don't want it to be any different size wise, I can save that, but you can see it stretched it to fit that size. There's that image, and you can see I can now click on it to change the image, which is great. The problem is that once again it doesn't do well with the sizes, and so what you need to do is actually upload the size of the image that you intend to use for this if you have a custom size for it. So even though this is a great feature, it's not implemented as well as it could be. So I tend to use these Oxygen blocks for things like call out messages and other design elements that you want the client to be able to change, but you just have to be careful of how you use certain elements. They're not implemented as well as I think they could be. Anyway, if you view this page, you'll see that that image does appear, and so you've got that messaging that's there. Now another thing that I like to do is enhance the way that Gutenberg works within the page. So there are a couple plugins that you should know about. I'm going to open this in a new tab. One of those plugins is the Editor's Kit. And so with Editor's Kit, what it allows me to do is show block lines, and that's what's giving me those lines around the outer side, the outer elements of each of these Gutenberg elements here. And then you can also use which is called markup, so our markdown. And markdown is a great way of creating some content really easily. So for example, I'll just hit enter and then I'll do a pound sign space, and that automatically makes it into a heading 2. This is a heading 2. So that's really great, and of course there are some other features. Now it's not that it's really difficult for you to do this manually, but it's just if you want to type quickly and get to these basic elements, then the markdown method that is inside the editor's kit is really helpful. Now another thing that I find kind of frustrating is that this doesn't really allow for a wider experience in Gutenberg without you adding something to it. So in plugins, you do have the ability to do a code snippets plugin, and if I activate this code snippets plugin, here you go, the snippets. So once again, because you don't have a traditional theme, you have to inject HTML, CSS, and other things different ways. And this is great because you do have the ability to create custom shortcodes and all sorts of stuff, and you can run it everywhere. It's really helpful. And then you can also create a snippet for making things a little bit larger. So I'm going to make this run everywhere, and this particular snippet is supposed to add to the head section some CSS to make my Gutenberg experience just a little bit bigger. So I'm making the max width 960 pixels. So if I save those changes, and let's make sure, I think that's active, so I'll go back to all snippets and make sure that one is active. Theoretically, this is supposed to change my editing environment to be wider. I don't find that it always works though. So I think sometimes it's easier just to make your own custom plugin. So if you look in the description of this particular video on YouTube, you'll find that there's a link to a folder, and it has this plugin that I've just created. So I'm going to go to the plugins, and I've installed the theme editor so I can make the plugin code look a little bit better. And I'm going to activate my custom plugin. Now, creating a custom plugin for WordPress is really easy for an easy plugin. And it's a necessary thing if you're going to be using Oxygen as your builder. So I'm going to go into the plugin editor, and it's going to use this theme editor, and I'm going to open up that custom plugin and just take a look at what we've got here. Basically, all we had is a folder called custom plugin, and inside that is a PHP file called custom plugin, and at the very top of that file it has the PHP, and then it has some commenting, and that commenting is basically what makes this an installable plugin. And you'll find tons of tutorials on how to create plugins on WordPress, but here's a very simple method, and so you'll find this, I grabbed this from some website. Now there's a couple things that are also important that I'm using here. So let's just kind of walk through this code just a little bit. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm adding some theme support for wide images in Gutenberg. And this, you can find more about this at the developer.wordpress.org, block editor, and the rest of the information. So then the next part that I have here is, of course, we have to activate that so that it is active. The next part of this is that I'm injecting some custom CSS into my admin by injecting it with this action, and we have to echo that CSS, and so you'll see here's that max width 960, and then here's the large full width image information. And by the way, this exact same code, CSS, also needs to be put in the front end. So if you've got it here and you've got it in the back end, we also need to take that exact same stuff and put it in our customize so we get that same CSS in the front end. So I'm going to close that, I'm going to add it, let me make sure this is correct. Oh, that's a problem right there. I need a slash and then the pound, or the asterisks. let's see, make sure I have that align full. That's there. At media, align wide, align full. That should be the align wide, and that should close that. So I don't see any other errors in here. But that does mean that I have a problem in my plugin that I need to adjust. So let's go back to plugins, plugin editor, select, and let's make sure that we have the right thing here. There it is. /star. That will make that work a little bit better. And now, if I go back to my pages, and I go back to that sample page, you'll now see that my Gutenberg is wider because of the fact that I added in that other information. Now, the other thing that we added in, if I go to an image, for example, and I use one of these media library images here, I can now make this thing go full width, and you'll see it makes it appear to be much larger in the page. And so that's adding that full width class. So you'll notice here though, that stuff is really spreading out quite a lot. So there is a reason here. What I need to do is go into the page, and I need to make this use just the regular catch-all template, so it's not being constrained. The problem with this is now all that content is going full width, but it means that the inner content here then needs to have a class on it to make it contained. So, this is, I know, a little troublesome. So what we would have to do is go to Advanced, put in a contained class or something like that. You have to hit Enter to apply it. And now when I view that page, you'll see it's not contained yet, but if I go to that, whoops, I need to go to my Customize, and then I'm going to add a contained class. And this is going to be max width, if I can spell width, and that's going to be 1240 pixels, and it's going to be margin 0 auto. So I don't know exactly if that's the size exactly that I want. It still says that it has a error, and I'm going to go ahead and save anyway because I believe that works, right? And you'll see that content is now going to be it's going to be the right width. Now do be aware, because I put in that 0 auto, it did kind of mess things up. So one of the things that changed the original padding that it had, or margin that it had. So what I'm going to do is margin left and margin right. There we go. Margin left and margin right. And that way, if I apply this on a paragraph or something else, it's not going to adjust the other margins that that particular element has. So you can see this is kind of a problem if you're trying to do both Gutenberg and Oxygen on one page, and you're trying to get full width. So just be aware that there are some strategies that you have to be, kind of battle with. There's no perfect way to do this that I currently know, but if you have a better way, please do post comment on this video about that. And that kind of takes us through how to use Gutenberg with Oxygen to make a little bit more client-friendly website. Of course, it's a lot easier when you're not trying to get full width objects like this, or full width content on the page. In the next tutorial, we are going to take a look at some plugins, some additional plugins for Oxygen that I think enhance it a bit as well. Thanks.